Good evening, everybody. Honored to have with us. So we've been chasing him for a long time. We finally got him. Rabbi Mendel Lifshitz from Chabad of Idaho. I want to mention that tonight's class is dedicated to Nishma Spila Bastvar Avraham HaKohen, and it's also dedicated today was the Yortzeit, of course, of the Alter Rebbe, and also of Dr. Sue Weisberg, Shoshana Bas Avram. Her neshama should have an aliyah. We're honored to have with us Rabbi Mendel Lifshitz from Chabad of Idaho. Idaho? That's crazy. So first of all, Rabbi, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Taking time. Welcome to our Zoom, and thank you for being with us. So let's get to started. What in the world are you doing in Idaho? How did you wind up in Idaho? What's the backstory? Give us a little bit of the history. Where are you from? Where's your family from? Your wife from? And what in the world are you doing in Idaho?
Rabbi Epstein, when you go to yeshiva and you misbehave, they send you to Idaho.
You must have pretty terrible.
I am kidding. Absolutely not. We won the lottery, and so we moved to Idaho. That's Baruch Hashem.
When did you move to Idaho? Let's get started.
We moved to Idaho in 2004. I was born in a little town called Brooklyn, grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Heard of it?
I am second generation Shaliach, was raised on Shalichus. My wife hails from Johannesburg, South Africa, born and raised in South Africa.
But where is her roots? Where are her real roots? Come on,
her real roots. That's just her temporary roots. Her real roots come from Chicago. She is the granddaughter of Rabbi Herschel Schusterman, Olav Shalom. The
Rav here in Chicago
Reuven for many years, for Yovel Shonim for over 50 years, and she grew up, however, in South Africa. Her parents were sent there by the Rebbe. That's where she was born and raised. After my wife and I got married, we decided that we were going to sign up with Chabad headquarters for a shlichus, a posting, and we got more than we bargained for. They said, "How about Idaho?" My wife and I had never been to Idaho until we were given the green light by Chabad headquarters to check out Idaho as a potential shlichus. And 2 weeks later, we were official shluchim to Idaho.
So walk us through that. How does that process unfold? How do you decide, okay, we want to go and spend our life, doing what's doing, bringing God's message, the Rebbe's message, et cetera, and then you're in Idaho. Like, give us a little bit. I mean, it's got to have a little bit of a story to it.
There's a little bit of a story, but not much. It's kind of a little bit less typical to the way that shluchim end up in these far-flung locations nowadays.
Say there's always a story.
And the story is really that there's no story. I had no connection to Idaho. I'd never been here as a bacher. A lot of shluchim end up going on shlichus where they went someplace as a yeshiva student on America Shlichus and the Roving Rabbis program. But I had never been here. I was actually for 3 years served as a assistant rabbi in the Shul of Bal Harbor, which is a very large Chabad synagogue in Florida.
Surfside, Florida. Yeah, Florida.
Yes,
okay.
The now famous Surfside. And after we got married, my wife and I looked at each other and we said, rabbis are a dime a dozen in Florida. Let's go someplace they need us. And we got more than we bargained for. Like I said, we went to Chabad headquarters and they said, how about Idaho? I looked to my wife, who was raised in South Africa, and I said, how about Idaho? And she said, where is that? I said, the potato place. And she said, no, never heard of it. So
I was going to ask that. Where is Idaho? I mean, what are you near? Give us a sense of the layout of what's going on in Idaho before you get there 20 years ago.
So Idaho is actually in the Northwest. It's not in the Midwest. It's quite far. We are further from Chicago than you are from New York, just to give you some perspective. It's about 7.5 hours from the Pacific Ocean. If you go drive, we're an hour from the Oregon coast, from the Oregon border, and 7.5 hours from the Oregon coast. So we border Oregon, we border Canada on the north, Utah and Nevada on the south, Wyoming and Montana on the east. We got a lot of neighbors, and we got a lot.
We've had the shluchim from a lot of those places on our show.
Yes, a lot of land surrounding us. So in Boise, Idaho, there was always, for the more than 100 years, there was a very small Jewish community here. But the community was not very traditional, to say the least. And there was
Well, can we
never
back up
any,
half a step? How did that community, what prompted Jews? When did they start arriving? You said 100 years ago. Did they come from Europe? Did they come from the East Coast? What was prompted them to Idaho?
in the 1870s and 1880s, some fur trappers actually moved to Idaho. And so the city of Boise started developing. This is before statehood, mind you. And eventually a small congregation, a Reformed congregation, was established, and which claims to be the oldest synagogue building in continuous use west of the Mississippi. So it's been for a long time, but it was really just a handful of families. And they came here for random opportunities, economic opportunities, mostly in retail businesses and things like that.
Oh, we see someone in the background.
We've got.
Who's that? Let's come on. We want to meet them.
And say hello. You want to say hello, Leah? So basically, actually, Idaho is interesting. It always had a Jewish community for over 100 years, but the community was not really what you think of in typical American terms of developed communities. There's no federation here. There's no JCC till today. There's no JCC. There's no federation. There's no real infrastructure of Jewish life, besides for this Reformed temple that's been here for 100 years, and Chabad. When we opened our doors, that remains the two organizations, Jewish organizations in the Boise area. So
take us back 20 years ago. So you and your wife, okay, you hear about this place called Idaho. You find it on the map. You never heard of it before. You don't have 100 people greeting you at the airport. They're not all lined up. So you show up in Idaho in 2004, and then what?
We show up. We only knew 3 Jews before we moved here. We come to Idaho. By the time we moved here,
to say hi. Who's that?
If you're gonna come inside the room, you have to say hi. That's the rule. Want to say hi? So sorry about that. So
don't be sorry. We love to see him. That's the best.
The community here was not very developed from a traditional perspective. We moved here. By the time we moved here, from those 3 Jews, one had been relocated by his job, another was terminally ill, and the other one has since moved to Kansas. So we're down to 0 from those 3 originals. But Baruch Hashem, instead, we've replaced them with many dozens and dozens more. We have, Baruch Hashem, several hundred families that we're in touch with in the Boise area. And of course, also throughout the state of Idaho. We also have, as the regional directors of Chabad in Idaho, we're responsible for other cities throughout Idaho, and we bring out yeshiva students, the roving rabbis, to cater to those other communities as well. So
can you give us some numbers, like how far away from Boise is there another community that may have a few Jews? Like what other cities or villages are there?
I would say there's probably 3 or 4 concentrations of Jews throughout Idaho outside of Boise. There is Southeast Idaho, which is Idaho Falls and Pocatello. Those are 2 cities about 45 minutes apart. There's maybe 50 to 100 families, our estimate, spread throughout those 2 cities. That's 4.5 hours away from Boise. And we did a Pesach Seder there. We sent young rabbis there to run a Pesach Seder last year. And of course, the summer we do programs there every year. And then in North Idaho, about 7 hours north of Boise, is a city called Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Northern Idaho. My wife and I did a Hanukkah party there this year. We usually send young rabbis to cater to that community. So there's maybe another 100 families up north Idaho. Moscow, Idaho is a college town where the College of Idaho, University of Idaho is. It became famous recently because of a tragic murder incident. That's about 5 hours away from here. And there's a handful of people that are out there in Moscow, Idaho, which is a college town. Not too many. There's probably more professors than there are students there that are Jewish. And then Sun Valley is a famous ski resort in central Idaho, about 2.5 hours away from here. and that has a lot of seasonal Jewish residents, some of whom are probably from Chicago. So that's the lay of the land. Our nearest neighboring shaliach and Chabad house is in Salt Lake City, Utah, which
Rabbi
is 5
Tippel.
hours away from here. Rabbi
5
Tippel.
hours.
It used to be 6 hours away, but now it's actually 5 hours away, thanks to the increased speed limit of 80 miles per hour in the
Nice.
Idaho interstate. So this is the Wild West out here. So I believe that we are technically the most remote Chabad house in the continental United States of America.
Oh, wow. So how does that work? So you're out there in Idaho, someone has a baby. Where do you get a moil? Someone has a bar mitzvah. How do you get a pair of tefillin? Like, well, how do you get your supplies? Oops, you're muted.
We import everything from out of town.
You got muted again. Rabbi, you got muted. Rabbi, you're muted. Rabbi.
He's talking to his kids.
Oh. See, a shliach is always on duty. He's doing everything. He's juggling. He's got the kids. He's got a class going on.
Sorry. Okay.
Don't be sorry. We love him. This is great.
This is still before the kids are all asleep in our home. So
well, we're honored to have them join. If they want to come in and talk about what it's like growing up in Idaho, we'd love to hear.
We get our kosher food shipped in. There is a Trader Joe's here in town that opened 3 or 4 years ago, so we do have some kosher options there. But for Chalav Yisrael, super kosher dairy products, as well as for meat products, if you want anything beyond a couple items, you need to have it shipped in from out of town, which we do. Luckily, we have
California,
very
Seattle?
good rates with special transport companies. We don't use DHL, we don't use UPS, we don't use FedEx. We have special transport companies called David, Mushka, Zali, and Ari. And our children that are out of town never come home.
We know them. We've had your son on from here in Chicago, the Masifta. We know about that.
So we know Osco Jewel's product line quite well.
So we think of Idaho, people know a lot about that. It's home to some white supremacists. You know, it's got a reputation as being a place that's not going to be very welcoming to Jews, to rabbis, to guys with beards and so forth. Have you had any experience with that element? How is the locals, we think of Idaho, you know, like you mentioned, the potato farmers and so on. What has the non-Jewish local community been like in their receiving of your presence there?
I think that the wider community has been remarkably supportive of Chabad, of Jews. And in fact, I believe there's less anti-Semitism in Idaho than there is in Chicago by far. And that's because most non-Jews in Idaho don't know what a Jew is in order to hate him. There's a lot of ignorance here, and we have our work cut out for us when it comes to ignorance. But as far as anti-Semitism, a lot of the stereotypes that you hear back east or in bigger cities like LA and Chicago and New York, you don't hear as much here. It certainly exists, especially as Boise grows and the world becomes smaller. But as a rule, I think there's much less of that here. In North Idaho, which, as I mentioned earlier, is 7 hours away, there was a historical group several decades ago called the Aryan Nation. And so that gave Idaho a terrible reputation. But to be honest, it was literally 30, 40 ex-convicts that hung out together and made a lot of noise and got on TV all the time. But it never really represented the wider community in Idaho. They were sued and shut down and disbanded. And I believe that their group is now headquartered in Pennsylvania, a few hours away from New York City, and Kansas, another splinter group. So we no longer have that claim to fame as the headquarters of the Aryan Nation anymore.
So we see Kanai Ari, your children. We had your son on a couple of weeks ago. Talk to us a little bit. How do you do that? How do you raise Chassidish children? They don't have any friends. What we think of Lubavitcher Chabad friends. They're not in a cheder. They're in an online school. How do you do that? I mean, it's hard enough, even in the big, Chicago, where you have all kinds of support. You have a cheder. You have teachers. They have friends. How do you handle that aspect of just being a parent out there all by yourself?
There's only one answer. You marry well.
Very smart man. Smart man.
Um,
Okay. I can't disagree with that. I recommend that as well.
It's really to my wife's credit that Baruch Hashem, Bli Ayin Hara, our children have been raised with such remarkable devotion to the Torah, Yiddishkeit, and Chassidus. We are fortunate in this day and age that we live in the world of technology, which the Rabbi always promoted as a tool for serving Hashem. And the Shluchim online school has been an invaluable resource for us in helping us raise our children and give them the proper Jewish education. But I remember the days before our children were in online school. David was one of the pioneers in online school. But in the earlier years, my wife homeschooled, and she still homeschools the younger children. And so it's really a remarkable effort on behalf of my wife. So I wasn't kidding earlier.
And talk to us a little bit, if you don't mind, how your children are involved in the shlichus. I mean, they have friends, they're kids, they want to play with other kids. And what is that like when the other kids are not Shabbos observant, they're not kosher observant, they're coming over to the house, to the shul, to the Chabad house? What is that like?
Our children are full partners in our shlichus. When it comes to Shabbos, for example, they eagerly are the ones that are preparing for Shabbos guests, welcoming Shabbos guests, speaking, sharing divrei Torah. We believe that part of bringing people closer to Yiddishkeit is for them to engage and immerse themselves into Jewish family life. And so for that, the children are more powerful shluchim than we are, in a sense. You were privileged to interact with David, our son, a short while ago, a couple of weeks ago. There was a family here in Boise that ended up sending their son to overnight camp, Chabad overnight camp, because they were so close and the children were so enmeshed that they wanted to send their son to the same camp as our children, despite the fact that our children are full-fledged Lubavitchers. And that family eventually joined a Nash Chabad community out of town.
Really?
So,
wow.
Yeah.
So that's probably another challenge. As people become more involved, more committed, they leave.
That's right. We are privileged to consider a couple of Chicago families, dear friends of ours, and families that began their
family.
part of our family,
What's that?
and that began their journey to Yiddishkeit here in Boise, Idaho. Some of them we're lucky enough to be looking at right now, and some of them that didn't know each other until we introduced them in Chicago as well. So yes, unfortunately, we don't have the infrastructure here to handle all of Jewish life. There's no Jewish education here. And so for a lot of families that become more observant, it means a one-way ticket out of town, unfortunately. It's a sign of our success, but it's something that we hope will change over time. We are currently under construction, building a mikveh. It's difficult to have a Jewish community without a mikveh, right? For example.
Wow. So you're building the first mikveh. Is there any other mikveh in Idaho?
Nope. This will be the first mikveh ever in the history of Idaho.
Wow, crazy. Okay, give us the website. What if somebody wants to participate? Let's go. Give us the website.
IdahoMikveh.com.
IdahoMikveh.com. I'm putting it in the chat. If anyone wants to, Idaho Mikveh with an H at the end or no H?
Yes, with an H. MIKVAH.com.
Okay, if anybody wants to jump in there and support the Idaho Mikveh.
Rabbi, do you have a relative here, Dr. Alan Lifshitz?
Not that I'm aware of.
Psychiatrist. No, he's a very frum guy, learned. Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought you might. That'd be interesting.
No, we'll get into the rabbi's favorite relatives shortly.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Someone else wanted to jump in? No. Yes. No. Anyone else want to jump in? Okay, Rabbi. We really appreciate your time. We thank you for spreading it. That's great that you're building a mikveh there. I put it in the chat. If anybody wants to participate, IdahoMikveh.com. You won't confuse it with any other mikvehs in Idaho. That's pretty wild. And we're honored to have your son here. I think you got two sons in Chicago now. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
No, we're honored to have them. And we're glad that they're, excellent deliverers of food when they travel home. And we're honored too. But we don't want to, we see what a beautiful family you have, but just share us the truth. Who's your favorite sister-in-law in your whole family?
My favorite sister-in-law is the one that I am waiting with bated breath to share good news with our family. So
That's
the one
right. Rabbi Lifshitz's brother is married to Raisi. Woo! That's how we get our guests. We have to Emily.
B'shah tov u'matzlachas.
Amen.
Very soon we should hear good news.
Amen. Brachas everyone. Okay, Rabbi, thank you 1,000 thank yous for all that you do. Thank you for taking time. Thank you for sharing with us about what life is like in a community like Idaho, a lot different than what we're experiencing here in Chicago. But the beauty is a lot of it is very much the same, because wherever we go, we find the same warmth and joy and happiness. So atzlacha rabba on your mikvah. Looking forward. Maybe we'll have you on next year and you'll give us a tour of the completed mikvah. That would be beautiful.
Thank you. Everybody's welcome to join. We love guests. It's people sometimes ask me, Rabbi, it's a burden. We don't want to come. We don't want to visit. I'm like, are you crazy? For us to have guests is a tremendous pleasure and privilege to see Jews from all over the world that come visit us. So please come on by. We'd love to have you.
I have a question.
Just make sure to
I have a
stop at Jewel
question.
first. Yeah. Okay, we got a question.
Yes.
Is Rabbi Grossbaum, is he helping you with your mikvah from Minnesota?
Rabbi Grossbaum has been out here twice already for
All
help.
right.
Okay. Okay.
So you
Make
it's
sure you
good.
have a good roof.
Yeah,
have
we
any-
have five different rabbis involved in building this mikveh, excluding me.
Beautiful. So it'll be a beautiful mikvah materially and spiritually,
Amen.
and bring
Amen.
kedusha
Thank you.
to the people of Idaho, and continue hatzlach and all of your good work, Rabbi. Thank you. Really appreciate
you.
you taking the
All the
time.
best, everybody.
Thank you, kids. Zag gesund. Tomorrow night, Mimer, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow night, 8:00 to continue the Mimer. Good night, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.